and welcome to another episode of Whitmer Art. My name is Kurt, and in this video I would like to share with you how I went about creating this image, which is a mock-up of a cover for an imaginary paperback book. It all started with a photograph that was put out for artists who were members of a website as a challenge to draw this fellow and make him look weird, but I thought he was unusual enough just as he was, so that's how I drew him, with my graphite pencils and some charcoal. And once I had a completed drawing, I took a picture that I could use in a digital editor. The first step that I took was to convert it into a sepia tone to give it that old-fashioned brown tint sort of look, like that. But I was thinking this photo looked a little washed out, so I decided to increase the contrast a bit to give it more definition. And I thought it might also be helped by adding some color to it. So I adjusted that as well and put it into a color equalizer and pumped up the orange tones a little bit and made sure that there was very little, if any, green in there. And that was our second step, and we now have a photograph that we can work with for our book cover. We saved that image into the computer, and then I started measuring a whole bunch of paperback books to see if there was a common aspect ratio among them, and I did find that the most common ratio were books that were about 1.5 times as tall as they were wide. So with that information, I was then able to set up an empty digital workspace with dimensions that matched that 1 to 1.53 ratio. And then I could pull in the image that we had just created, put it in there, and luckily it went right to the bottom, which is where we want it anyway. We're trying to create more headspace above that hat so that we can put a title in there. And we'll use a clone tool to go in to the image and grab a section of it and repaint above to raise that upper horizontal line and make the image go all the way to the top of the workspace. You'll notice that there are some blue circles and some red circles that appear as I'm clicking and maneuvering here. The blue circle is a part of the painting or image that I'm grabbing with my mouse, and then move upwards and click again with the left mouse button, and that will paint. So it's right button to grab a piece of image and a left button to paint it in a different place than where it was. And continuing on and raising that background even higher and higher until we end up with a completed image that's in the perfect 1 to 1.5 proportion for our book cover. Now I'll open up the vector graphic program that we'll use to complete the rest of our book cover. Our first step is to create a workspace that is in exactly the same proportion as our finished book cover, but I'm making it 4 times larger so that as we progress we'll be able to zoom in and work on smaller details. So the first step after we bring in the image that we've created previously is to resize it to fit the larger workspace. The next step is to create the banner that goes across the bottom of our image, and we start with a basic rectangle and change its colors by picking colors out of the image itself to maintain color harmony, and create a banner with a stroke around it and put it in place and size it down so it fits more comfortably. Instead of just having a rectangle, I'd like to have something a little fancier than that, so we're going to make another square, change the opacity so that we can see through it and line it up with the corner of our main banner, and copy it and paste it 3 more times. and then align each of those boxes to each other so that they're all squared off on the corners. Then we'll adjust and adjust again and keep maneuvering until they're perfect. And we select all 4 of the corners, including the center, and the magic of vector graphics, we unify them so that we have one shape that looks like this with a continuous border all the way around it. Now that we have the banner created, we can add our volume number 13 and the title of the book inside there by using the text tool. You can see that it's very tiny as we type it, but we're going to enlarge that. That's part of the detail work that I mentioned earlier. And then create the title. We work that out, and notice that the cases don't matter because we're choosing a font that only has one case, uppercase, and we're sizing them together now. And we'll select them both and align them so that they're centered on each other, and then move on to change the colors of those letters so that they're not that stark black color, but something that's more harmonious with Captain Steampunk's image. We align both lines of text together by making them a group, and we move them so that they're centered within the banner, and we're ready to move on. Going up above, we'll create another line of text that reads "The Amazing Adventures of." We'll use the same font. If you use too many fonts in one image, it tends to look weird. So we'll size this up and create it. At this point, I have no idea where the edges of the image are, so we zoom out and we find that we still need to enlarge that line of type even further. We center it in the image, and we're ready to move on to our final line of type. And I think for this one we'll use a different font for the Major Steampunk. That was the font we used for the others. Let's find something else that looks a little more interesting, and that one right there could work very well. So we'll again enlarge that. There, that looks good. And center it up. And instead of the black lettering, let's change it a little bit. There, that looks a little more harmonious. And we'll add another stroke around the edges of those letters. And when we zoom in a moment or two, you'll see that they did actually change color. It's hard to see at this zoom level. Now, I'd like to make this a little more interesting, and I think what we'll do is stretch some of the letters. So we're going to add these guidelines in here so that everything can be stretched uniformly. And we'll start with the S and stretch it and stretch it, and move on to the M and do the same thing here. And I think it would actually look better if it were switched left to right so that the heavy stroke of the M is on the left. Now let's zoom in, and now you understand why I made a larger image to work with. And we're going to drag the tail of the P down and straighten it up, and move over here and grab the top part of the K, and let's stretch that up to the guideline. And there we have something that looks a little more interesting than just a line of letters. Now I'll move on to create some embellishments to dress things up a little bit, but not so much as to distract from the actual artwork. I'm thinking we'll use this little 4-pointed star and change its color, and that way we can move it into the design. Rotate it around to make sure it's square, size it down, and test it out for size again here on the lettering. Zooming in, and again you can see why we're working on an oversized image, so that we can get into these details. And I think it'd be probably better if we change the color to match the stroke of the letter. Slide it over right there. Moving on, we'll copy it and paste it into the S. Rotate it a little bit to follow the stroke, the shape of the S. Reposition, get it in the center, and copy that. And now we'll go down to our banner and put it one here. Size it to fit that box. Copy that. And then place it again in that corner. Slide over and put one here. Make sure it's centered. And another one there. We're getting there. We're getting really close. We've got one more thing to do. Let's make a border to go all the way around the edge of the book. And what we're going to do here, any old rectangle will do, and we're going to mathematically make it the same size as the page that we've been working on. And of course, with the fill and stroke created by a vector graphic, we can turn off the interior and leave just the border, and then we'll adjust the size of the border to make it more visible, and then simply slide it into place. Now, I should mention to you that I purposefully put in a mistake to see if anyone was paying attention. So if you've caught the mistake before this point, leave a comment down below, and simply the number 13 will be enough to tell me that you saw the difference between the original volume 13 and the mistake that I made here in putting in volume number 12. And I did that to show you just how easy it is to correct a mistake in vector graphics. Volume 13 is the Plains of American. And we are finally finished with our book cover. I hope you found all of this interesting, and if you did, please give it a like and a share. And if you're not already a subscriber, please remember to do that before you leave. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Whitmer Art.